Hello and welcome to my comparison of the three RST X releases we've had over the last couple years. I did cover the comparison briefly in the X3 review, but wanted to give it some more time because of how different these three balls are, despite what the comparison on paper looks like, and I have sport footage for this video as well. All three balls have the same core, of course, the RST or Rotostar Tour core, 253RG, 053 differential, and an 016 intermediate differential and 15 pounds. The RG is really high for an ASIM. Usually you don't see those much above 250, but it offers a little different look. You still have the strength or the torque of an ASIM ball, but without revving up so early. Even though the designers put a lot of different cover strengths on asymmetric cores to mix it up and offer variation, going from a typical super low RG strong ASIM core like the atomic core in the physics line down to even a strong symmetric core like the icon in the idle line can be a big gap. So it's nice to have the RST series to split that gap. Another note is that I have all the surfaces at 4K fast in this video to compare them directly. On the house shot first, popping up the graph, the house pattern here is similar to Kegel's Easy Street, but higher volume, so it's a little tougher than your average house shot, but not difficult by any means, and we're also bowling on brand new pins. The cover on the RST X-1 is Microtrax Hybrid, very similar to Storm's NRG, most notably on the original physics and most recently on the Trend 2, in hybrid form at least, so you know it's a pretty strong cover. The X1 offered a similar look to the physics, but longer, a little sharper. Even going down from a physics to an astrophysics is a pretty big jump, big difference in those cover formulas, so having the X1 under or sideways from the physics to have the same kind of look or traction level while not revving up so early is helpful. It also helps add a little shape to the ball because rather than beginning to roll or rev and use up some of that energy earlier, it pushes the reaction closer to the pins. Once again, I don't use this layout anymore because it's a little too jerky. The new one I use that's on the X2 and X3 just blends the shape a little more, marginally stronger pin to pap, a little weaker PSA to pap, doesn't affect the length or hook potential at all, just makes it a touch smoother and more continuous. I'm really glad the X3 gave me the opportunity to rediscover the X1 because I did use it quite a bit after it released, but of course as we continue to get more balls, stuff gets shuffled around and the older stuff sometimes gets forgotten about. It's back in the rotation now though, and I'm going to make sure it sticks around this time. The X2 is next, and this is also one I've used quite a bit. It's been either in the rotation or on the short list ever since I got it. The clean cover puts it in astrophysics and UC2 territory without rolling or revving quite as early, so it splits the gap between those and something like an idle synergy or a phase 4. Still gives me the ASIM torque without being as aggressive as an astro or UC2. There's a lot of similarities between it and the X1. They roll very much alike. The X2 is just a weaker overall version of the X1, and I think that's been easy to see. This range of reaction is very useful and very versatile. If you get much stronger, then you're getting into more limited use stuff for fresh conditions and or heavier volumes, and much weaker and you're into transitional stuff and medium condition stuff. This medium strength cover with a medium strength asymmetric core is going to be strong and sharp enough for lower rev rates and even more useful for higher rev rates especially, but the one box this one won't check off is the high speed one. If you've got higher speed, this might be a really limited use ball for you because again, clean cover, medium RG, unless you're bowling on dirt, the X2 just may not see it early enough to produce good ball reaction. Saying see it is another one of those tournament bowler terms. When they say the ball isn't seeing it, that means the ball just isn't seeming to react or isn't really picking up and moving. So if they say see it after they throw the ball, they mean they want the ball to start picking up and hooking. Finally, the X3 in a completely different look. One thing you always need to be conscious of is that balls will feel and act a lot different than they look on video. It's very hard to get the significance of the differences between balls through the camera. It's funny how that works because if you're actually bowling and you throw one ball, strike, and then throw another ball and it hooks a couple feet earlier and leaves a 4-pin or a 3-6-10 for righties, it's like, oh wow, that one hooked a bunch more. As soon as you see it on video, it's like, it's a little stronger. Also, shape is somewhat difficult to see on video. You can usually see sharpness or this ball is smoother or sharper than another one, but whether it's a rounder shape like an Infinite Physics, more of an arc like the Reality Check, or more of a heavy rolling, chuggy, hook set look like the X3, those things can seem to run together more on video. When you're actually throwing the ball yourself, it's a whole lot easier to feel and read the difference. In addition, different colors do different things to your perception. For some people, brighter colors like this make it easier to see what the ball's doing because they can watch the colors swirl and then read the reaction through how the swirling changes. But for some, it's really distracting. They prefer the darker, more uniform colors so they can see the smaller things about what the ball is doing on the lane. Talking specifically about the ball reaction now, it's so much earlier than either the X1 or X2. Those are both pretty zippy through the fronts. They roll without revving super fast, and they don't really try to slow down. This is another odd thing. It looks like I'm throwing the X3 slower than the X1 and X2, but it's just that this one hits the lane and rolls so heavy that it's actively slowing down and wanting to move. I made the comment in the review that it feels like it just wants to rip the lane up as it's rolling, and that's the best way to describe it. It's easier to understand if you're actually throwing the ball, though. Before we get into the sport footage, I've tried to avoid this as much as possible because I hate seeing it in videos myself, but liking, subscribing, and leaving a comment are the easiest ways to support the channel and keep the videos coming. The YouTube algorithms love that stuff, so do a couple clickies and let me know in the comment section what else you'd like to see the RST X-3 compared to in future videos. If you like either of my jerseys, this is the color hex design, and my code Rosdahl10 gets you 10% off everything on the CoolWick website at checkout. Code is in the description to copy and paste. If you're in the market for any new equipment like the RST X-3, for example, I have a direct link in the description to purchase it at Bowler's Mart. Using the link, associate your purchases with me, which helps my sponsors justify their support, and I do also earn a 5% commission from sales using the link. The SRGBBFS group on Facebook is a great place to go for all things SPI, specializing in used, rare, and international equipment. Thanks to Turbo, and extra thanks to Storm for their support and sponsoring of the channel. Also, the new super thanks button below the video on the line with the like and share buttons allows you to leave me a tip, other than that cake and polyester don't mix. Switching to the sport pattern and some really snazzy white slacks. I'm going to continue with the X3, but we'll pop the graph up here first. A couple feet longer, a lot higher volume, and at just over a 2-to-1 ratio. It's a lot more difficult. The X3 is more the same on this. There's just less miss room now. I didn't feel like I had a whole lot of room to miss on the house shot to begin with, but I have zero room period from straighter. I'm not sure I could actually strike from here. A bit left and it hangs, a bit right and it's gone. I have to throw it harder to get it down the lane, but then it just exaggerates the over-under. It still overhooks if I get it in, and it just makes misses out worse. Moving inside helps marginally. It at least allows me to roll it a little, but there's no room for messing around. I've got to be really firm and confident with it for it to have a chance. It's just such a strong ball, and while I'd say that I think it needs higher speeds, James has higher speed, and that wasn't the greatest matchup either. I think this is big power for low revs, and it'll be a god ball for those who like to slow hook the whole lane because it doesn't necessarily rev up early. It hooks early. So if you can use angle to get it down the lane, you can play with and control the shape. It is very responsive to hand position changes and physical adjustments. It's just so hard to see because the fight to get it down the lane is real. So I decided to try taking it to 2000, and like I mentioned in the review, I thought it would cause James more problems than it would solve. This is part of that proof. I do have a Sport Essentials video coming that features James as well, and will show the surface adjustments he made also. At 2000, it made it quite a bit stronger and earlier without really blending it out at all. This is just a monster of a ball, and outside of low rev rates and people that generally have trouble with traction and shape, the sport usage of this ball will probably be limited. This should be really good for people that need the traction of something like a gem or a reality, but need more shape. For those that don't have an issue creating shape though, you'll likely need the control of one of the balls I just mentioned over this one. Contrasting it with the X1, the reaction it's just night and day. I have no idea how these two balls are related at all. The X1's a lot more like a longer and stronger infinite physics. Pretty easy up front and a rounder shape down lane, even though it's still really quick. From straighter, it's also pretty difficult to control. I have a really small window, but there is a window. It does give me more length, so it allows me to roll it more or try to control the shape more, so once I get a little deeper, it's a lot more workable. I decided not to add any surface to the X1 because it was fine, and realistically, I shouldn't be using either the X1 or X3 on this anyway. Way too much ball reaction, way too much torque. Plus, like with the X3, I think I'd have actually made the X1 worse with surface. I wouldn't have gotten much, if any, extra blend, and just would have made it hook more and hook earlier. I wasn't making the best shots either. Good shots with the X1 look pretty good, but still, obviously neither of these are the right ball, and as a lefty on something tougher, any asim period isn't likely going to be the call. Looking at the X2, here's at least something to work with because the cover isn't near as strong, so I got a lot easier length, much less overall ball reaction. It's also the smoothest of the three, at least on the sport pattern, and once again, here's a class in ball reaction. There's not much difference, if any, between the house pattern and the sport pattern for the X1 and X3 because they have stronger covers. They're going to get their traction and their ball motion, and if anything, they're sharper on the sport pattern because the oil up front is helping move most of that ball reaction towards the end of the lane. The X2 was keeping up with them just fine on the house pattern, but here on the sport pattern, the cleaner medium strength E-Trax cover doesn't have near the amount of traction the other two balls do, so it's not getting any traction early, so it can't start the hook phase early enough, so by the time it hits friction, it hasn't hooked yet, so it can't roll, so that's why it's smoother. People say not to overcomplicate things, but this is why I take the time to explain stuff like this, because bowling is inherently very complicated, and it's only when you understand that it's complicated and the ways that it's complicated in that you can then begin to simplify it. Once again, the RST X-3 releases on August 19th with the Hype Solid and Hustle USA. I have the reviews for those up now, plus plenty of comparisons on the way. Big thanks to my Patreon members and great Discord community. Thank you for watching, and may the strikes be with you.